Tonight's show is brought to you by The Ultimate Production Tutorial. If you like what you see and you want to know more about film production, please follow the website link in the description below to learn more. While you're there, you can check out my show notes, where you can double-check my references, comment, and act like the film critic I know you are.
Thanks.
Also, all of the items on the website are affiliate links, so if you find anything of interest, please click on through. Finally, please subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, pray, and send good vibes to help us keep delivering great content. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another edition of Movie Night Madness. I'm your host, Sisyphus Jones, and I'm joined by my co-host and research partner, Doc Rock. Say hello, Doc.
Hello, Doc.
Never gets old. On tonight's agenda, I have a short presentation with some trivia about the production and some of the production notes that went into tonight's film. Then we're going to watch the movie together, and then we'll have a post-movie discussion about everything that we saw and everything that I presented at the beginning. I'd like to foster a you're on the couch with me vibe, so if at any moment you feel like making a comment, asking a question, or trading some booty for some food stamps, feel free to do so. So, tonight's movie, Soylent Green, released in 1973. It was directed by Richard Fleischer, written by Stanley R. Greenberg, and the original story was written by Harry Harrison. It stars Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson, and Leigh Taylor Young. These are the scores on the tomato meter. It's got a really good score on Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb also does pretty good it's a pretty solid score for a movie of its kind. It had a $4 million budget. Today, with inflation, is adjusted to $27 million. The box office, the domestic box office, so what it made in the United States, was $7 million in total. So it pretty much doubled, or close to doubled, the amount of money that was invested in it. That's $48 million today, and that's equivalent to 4.2 million tickets sold. As an equivalent, because it's not really The Hunger Games was a blockbuster. This one was not. This was a sort of a smaller film. However, it was a post-apocalyptic movie. The budget was $78 million for Hunger Games, $189 million in domestic gross, and 24 million tickets sold. Which is kind of nice to see, because even Hunger Games, with the budget that it had, it made pretty much just a little bit over twice as much. So it gives you an idea of where we're at. This movie didn't win any major awards except for the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films for Best Dramatic Presentation by Edward G. Robinson. So this movie was based on a book by Harry Harrison, written in 1966. Harry Harrison was exploring the consequences of population growth and hoarding of resources by the wealthy minority. It was also originally serialized in before it became a book. It was serialized in Impulse magazine. The major difference between the book and the movie was that the book, everything happened in 1999. The movie was set in 2022. The book refers to Soylent Steaks, while the movie refers to Soylent Green. Soylent Steaks was made out of lentils and some other ingredients, and Soylent Green and the very Soylent products was a bunch of processed food rations depicted in the film, and that's not exactly the same way that it happened in the book. The book talked a lot about condoms and protection, while the movie goes in a completely different direction in that. And I don't want to give too much, but I guess you'll get it through my presentation. Also, Harry Harrison claims that he came up with the idea when he was talking to an Indian that he met after the war. An Indian, meaning the dot, not the feather. In 1946, he said that the Indian told me that overpopulation was going to be the upcoming world problem, which is very interesting. I'm wondering whether or not the story is true. Maybe he embellished it a little bit, or that particular Indian was somebody who was very well connected, because that would be a very weird thing for an Indian to say, like overpopulation is going to be the next problem. So as a production note, Harrison was contractually denied control over the screenplay. And during the negotiation process, Harrison was never told that Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was going to buy the film rights to this film.
He got shafted.
You got shafted. So what was happening during this particular part of the time where Harrison wanted to write this book, and we have a bunch of films. We've watched four, three of which were from this particular generation, where they talked about all these crazy world issues and these weird things that were happening. And specifically in this film, we're talking about end of the world, overpopulation, that kind of thing. So this is the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome met in 1968. It's the de facto predecessor to World Economic Forum. In fact, one of the attendants at the Club of Rome was Klaus Schwab himself. And he said that having seen that particular meeting, having been invited and seen that particular meeting, that's how he came up with the World Economic Forum idea. So it's pretty much the same thing. Most of the people in the Club of Rome are also in the World Economic Forum. So it's sort of give and get.
And Bilderberg.
And Bilderberg and all those various international organizations, this G6, et cetera, et cetera. It calls itself a nonprofit informal organization of intellectual business leaders, of intellectuals and business leaders whose goal is a critical discussion of pressing global issues. It stimulated considerable amount of public attention in 1972 when it released its report, The Limits to Growth. The Limits to Growth is a computer simulation that suggests that the economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. So Limits to Growth is the basis for much of the fear-mongering that environmental groups are using today, were using back in the day. It's all about sort of resource depletion and not being able to provide for the next generation. In 1972, the report projected that exponential consumption would deplete the important non-renewable resources such as soil, natural gas, copper, tin, and lead before the year 2000. Well, the year 2000, we're 2023, and that didn't seem to happen. We seem to still have all those things. Also, in 1968, a very famous book called The Population Bomb, written by Paul Ehrlich, was released. This book is infamous for being very alarmist. Early editions of The Population Bomb began with this particular statement in the first pages of the book. The battle to feed all of humanity is over. In the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any crash program embarked upon right now. At this late date, nothing can prevent this substantial increase in the world death rate. In the book, he also said, we must rapidly bring the world population under control, reducing the growth rate to zero or making it negative. Conscious regulation of the human numbers must be achieved. Simultaneously, we must, at least temporarily, greatly increase our food production. Those numbers were very wrong. When Soylent Green came out in 1973, the US was already below replacement levels. And in 2020, almost all of the developed world birth rates were at below replacement levels. Way below replacement levels. Replacement levels means that for every family, you'll have the same amount of people that will be born. So for every couple, there'll be 2 children. And they say that you need more than 2 children because there's always one that dies off early, and so on and so forth. So replacement level is currently at 2.1 persons per couple. You can see here in Canada, it's 1.4, 1.6 in 2020, in Brazil, 1.7, Russia, 1.5, Australia, 1.6, even India, where we're talking about 1 billion people, they're not replacing their population. So that could be either a conscious thing where we've gotten to a point where we don't need so much, or it could be something more nefarious. We can talk about that later, I guess. So
it's Hollywood. It's Hollywood, I'm telling you.
Yeah, Hollywood's making the problem. Too many people are watching movies, not enough people are having sex. That's they're taking our attention away. The filming of Soylent Green was done by this guy, Richard Fleischer. He's the director. He's known for directing these films, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, when he was in contract with Disney. Fantastic Voyage also. The Red Sonja with Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I've never seen, and Mr. Majestic, which I personally haven't seen, but it's one of Doc's favorite movies, supposedly. With
I love Mr. Majestic. It's written by Elmore Leonard, and that is indeed a good movie, and it's definitely one of Charles Bronson's best.
Okay, so I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. I don't remember I had a Charles Bronson stage at one point, but I don't remember any of them. They all seem to melt together. So people who have worked with him, his cameraman particularly, says that he's a very organized director, and he spent the latter part of his life as a substitute director, meaning occasionally on a production, you have the directors that quit, or they get fired, or they are sick, or something along those lines. And because of his very good organization skills, he can pick up where the last director left off. And he was often used, especially at the end of his career, as a substitute director. There isn't a lot of production notes on this guy. The only other thing that I can tell you is that he's the son of a very famous cartoonist. Max Fleischer was a very famous cartoonist. He was the creator of Betty Boop. He also animated the 1942 version of Superman, which has a very, very cool animated style. It looks sort of rotoscoped. And he animated a lot of the Popeye cartoons. So this movie is considered very prophetic in both the conspiracy circles and among the greenies and the environmentalists. It was able to predict no more funerals, no more resources, no more meat, socialist welfare state, medical assistance in dying, rationed water, silencing the truth, and silencing the rabble-rousers, the folks who want to, make sure that the government doesn't get away with what they're supposed to. With all the conspiracies that I could choose from to focus on that were mentioned in this film, global warming, overpopulation, the Malthusian catastrophe, I'll have to speak about the Soylent Green one, or more specifically, the food system conspiracies. So for the folks who haven't seen the movie, this is a major spoiler, so shut your ears.
Soylent Green is still made out of people! They didn't change the recipe like they said they were going to! It's still people!
So Soylent Green is made out of people. That was Phil Hartman. And from this movie, the only thing I remember is Phil Hartman's version of that line. You'll see it later, and you're going to be like, yep, Phil Hartman did better. So now that I got that spoiler out of the way, you're going to probably ask me, okay, I totally follow you on the president sacrificing children to the reptilian overlords in the basement of that Denver airport. And I'm even warming up to the evidence that you showed me last week about the whole moon landing thing being faked by JFK and Princess Diana to distract you from Paul McCartney's death. But Sisyphus, can you expect me to believe that due to the food shortages caused by chemtrails, the government wants to feed us human meat to depopulate the world? Do you really believe I can believe that? Well, all I can say is conspiracy, it finds a way. So let's see what's in store for us, shall we? Human compost, aka natural organic reduction, or termination. This is legal in Sweden, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, New York, Vermont, California, and Nevada. It's a process based on techniques developed for composting livestock. It involves encasing the human corpse in wood chips, straw, alfalfa, so that thermophile microbes decompose the body. And then 30 days later, voila, you can take a wheelbarrow full of grandpa home with you. The average 200-pound person will produce 6 pounds of nitrogen, 2 pounds of phosphorus, and 1 pound of potassium. This is the equivalent as the same 6-to-1 ratio of cottonseed meal fertilizer. This is the company Recompose, previously known as the Urban Death Project. It offers this particular service of composting a loved one for $7,000. And Recompose was founded by an $80,000 Echoing Green Fellowship grant. So this is Echoing Green. It's a foundation, and these are the Echoing Green's donors. So these are the people who are donating to Echoing Green's foundation. And now you see all this stuff, and you're saying, "Okay, sis, our current burial process is pretty much like composting." And anyway, I find it pretty poetic that an apple tree could be grown from my bio waste. Okay, if this isn't extreme enough for you, how about human fertilizer? It's also known as alkaline hydrolysis, or biocremation, or resomation, or flameless cremation, or aquamation, or water cremation. There's a lot of terms for this one. This is a process of disposal of human or pet remains using lye and heat, and it's an alternative to burial or cremation. The process is based on alkaline hydrolysis, and the body is placed in a pressured vessel where it is filled with a mixture of water and potassium hydroxide, and then it is heated to 160 degrees Celsius, or 320 Fahrenheit. The body is basically broken down to its chemical components, which takes about approximately 4 to 6 hours. And as a result, a green-brown tinted liquid containing amino acids, peptides, sugars, and salts, and soft, porous white bone remain. And this bone is easily crushed by hand into a white-colored dust. This dust is called ash, and you can give this ash to the next of kin, the family members that have had this person go through the process. And the liquid is then disposed through sanitary sewer systems, or if you wanted to, you could use it as a fertilizer in your garden or green space. So this process, not the disposal, the way of disposing, but this process is legal in Australia, Belgium, Canada, Ireland, Mexico, the Netherlands, South Africa, United Kingdom, and all of the United States, but 3 states. In Australia, the company that's known to do this is Aquamation. They're based out of New South Wales. And with the remains that they have, they use it as fertilizer on a plantation forest due to the difficulty of obtaining water permits from the Sydney Water Company. So because they can't obtain the water permits, they are still allowed to use the process, and they're fertilizing forests with it. So forget making it taste the way Grandpa would have made it. With this particular method, you can guarantee that your garden salad will taste exactly like Grandpa. Okay, how about human printed meat? Yeah. This is the Ouroboros Steak Company. So this is a joke, or not a joke. This was an art installation. It's not a joke because they actually printed meat out of human cells with this. In 2020, an artist named Orkan Telhan, an associate professor of fine arts at the Stuart Weitzman School of Design University in Pennsylvania, spent a year imagining how climate change might impact the future of food consumption. He collaborated with scientists to create a project that included 3D printed pancakes, bioengineered bread, and genetically modified salmon. But the most provocative installation is a less appetizing development called Ouroboros steaks. Ouroboros is the famous serpent, the snake that's eating its own tail. The meat is cultivated from human cells and expired blood. Mr. Telhan added, it was a misinterpretation that was politicized in all the wrong ways because humans eating each other is a taboo topic. What he was trying to point out, more than just saying that we're going to be eating this in the future, was the fact that for lab-grown meat, you're still going to need cattle, because you need the placenta cells, you need the stem cells from the mother cow or the mother chicken or whatever it is to be able to produce this kind of meat. So there's a give and take. Like you're going to cut down a lot on the cattle, but it's not going to be all the cattle. So there's a thing that he's trying to promote, that to show that off essentially as an artist, to say like, okay, maybe we're not going the right direction by printing meat. But because that was a statement, here's Byte Labs. In 2014, there's a guy named Kevin, I couldn't find the last name of this guy, who was doing some market research to see whether people would be interested in buying human meat. His idea, Byte Labs, was hoping to get celebrities like Ellen DeGeneres Jennifer Lawrence, Kanye West on board to donate tissue samples that will eventually become salami. Byte Labs told the Los Angeles Times that its primary goal was to provoke discussion and debate around topics of bioethics and celebrity culture, but also plainly stated that they are gauging the market interests for an actual lab-grown celebrity salami project. We see inefficiencies and environmental hazards and ethical problems around the world, food production and distribution. There are exciting new opportunities to disrupt the industry while opening new ways to consume celebrity culture. Kevin told Motherboard, which is a magazine, the product indeed is salami, and that each one will have about 30% celebrity meat and 40% lab-grown animal meat. That sounds so disgusting. with spices. This gets more intense and more the more updates we get from them. However, since 2018, they've stopped posting anything. In fact, the last thing that I could find was a Facebook post in 2018, and the website was taken down. So, with just a few hair follicles, you can keep Grandpa really close to your heart. You see, because the stomach is close to the heart, you can keep him close to the heart. That's the joke. Okay, all right. So, cannibalism. Let's talk about the science behind cannibalism. So this is Paul Ehrlich. Will overpopulation drive us to eat our own dead? Controversial academic claims humanity is moving towards cannibalism at a ridiculous speeds. This was written in 2014, so Paul Ehrlich still believed in the bullshit that he said at the beginning of his book that didn't come true. Scientists suggest eating human flesh might fight climate change. This is a dude from Sweden who did that kind of thing.
Sure it will.
Oh, there's a book we missed. Okay, there's a guy named Bill Schultz. He wrote a book about how it is a natural thing to eat, to be cannibal, because there's a bunch of historical precedent. So let me show you this 4-minute cartoon that was shown on TED.
15th century Europeans believed they had hit upon a miracle cure, a remedy for epilepsy, hemorrhage, bruising, nausea, and virtually any other medical ailment. This brown powder could be mixed into drinks, made into salves, or eaten straight up. It was known as mummia, and made by grinding up mummified human flesh. The word cannibal dates from the time of Christopher Columbus. In fact, Columbus may even have coined it himself. After coming ashore on the island of Guadalupe, Columbus's initial reports back to the Queen of Spain described the indigenous people as friendly and peaceful, though he did mention rumors of a group called the Caribs, who made violent raids and then cooked and ate their prisoners. In response, Queen Isabella granted permission to capture and enslave anyone who ate human flesh. When the island failed to produce the gold Columbus was looking for, he began to label anyone who resisted his plundering and kidnapping as a Caribe. Somewhere along the way, the word Carib became canibe, and then cannibal. First used by colonizers to dehumanize indigenous people, it has since been applied to anyone who eats human flesh. So the term comes from an account that wasn't based on hard evidence, but cannibalism does have a real and much more complex history. It has taken diverse forms. Sometimes, as with mummia, it doesn't involve recognizable parts of the human body. The reasons for cannibalistic practices have varied too. Across cultures and time periods, there's evidence of survival cannibalism, when people living through a famine, siege, or ill-fated expedition had to either eat the bodies of the dead or starve to death themselves. But it's also been quite common for cultures to normalize some form of eating human flesh under ordinary circumstances. Because of false accounts like Columbus's, it's difficult to say exactly how common cultural cannibalism has been. But there are still some examples of accepted cannibalistic practices from within the cultures practicing them. Take the medicinal cannibalism in Europe during Columbus's time. Starting in the 15th century, the demand for mummia increased. At first, stolen mummies from Egypt supplied the mummia craze, but soon the demand was too great to be sustained on Egyptian mummies alone, and opportunists stole bodies from European cemeteries to turn into mummia. Use of mummia continued for hundreds of years. It was listed in the Merck Index, a popular medical encyclopedia, into the 20th century. And ground-up mummies were far from the only remedy made from human flesh that was common throughout Europe. Blood, in either liquid or powdered form, was used to treat epilepsy, while human liver, gallstones, oil distilled from human brains, and pulverized hearts were popular medical concoctions. In China, the written record of socially accepted cannibalism goes back almost 2,000 years. One particularly common form of cannibalism appears to have been filial cannibalism, where adult sons and daughters would offer a piece of their own flesh to their parents. This was typically offered as a last-ditch attempt to cure a sick parent, and wasn't fatal to their offspring. It usually involved flesh from the thigh, or less often, a finger. Cannibalistic funerary rites are another form of culturally sanctioned cannibalism. Perhaps the best-known example came from the Foray people of New Guinea. Through the mid-20th century, members of the community would, if possible, make their funerary preferences known in advance, sometimes requesting that family members gather to consume the body after death. Tragically, though these rituals honored the deceased, they also spread a deadly disease known as kuru through the community. Between the fictionalized stories, verifiable practices, and big gaps that still exist in our knowledge, there's no one history of cannibalism. But we do know that people have been eating each other, volunteering themselves to be eaten, and accusing others of eating people for millennia. On a cannibalism kick? Check out this video and meet some of the animal kingdom's most conspicuous.
So, you guys hungry? Fuck it. Let's just eat it, Grandpa.
Yeah.
Thanks. So, present. This is the present food system where we're at this moment. So,
Jeez, that looks good.
Yeah. This is just a description. I'm Italian. Food is sacred to me. Food is sacred to Italians in general. For anybody who's traveled to Italy and understands what lunch is like, pranzo, it's a standard 5-course affair. You got the antipasti, you got the primi, you got the secondi, the contorni, and the dolci, right? Like you go to Italy, that's basically what they serve you at every restaurant. You go to, your grandmother does the same thing. Everybody serves this to you. Italians literally get angry if you can't continue eating after a specific course. So what's weird is I remember going back and forth between the United States and Italy, and like you'd look at the body types, and the body types are completely different. Italians eat way more, and yet the Italian body type is different from the American. Americans get much bigger. They're a completely different shape. This is basically to show you the difference. This is a U.S. male. Italy's not in here, but essentially this is basically what you see in Europe. And the Italians have always been sort of the rounder Europeans, but Americans get kind of crazy. And what's really funny is, is that you can see this with Americans just looking at different generations. In fact, you can compare Americans just 2 generations ago, and you can see that there's something that's gone quite wrong with our diets. These are Americans from the 1950s. You look at the beach here. Find me the fat person. Find me. This is a Ouija picture. This is one of my favorite pictures ever. Like, there are people that, need to lose a couple of pounds, but they're not these guys. This is today. There's a whole lot of variables that go into this particular description, specifically one because the latter photos I looked up fat people on the beach, so that doesn't count too well. But a lot of things have changed on this particular topic, and I feel that food is definitely one of them. So let's look and see.
Mickey D's.
What's that?
Mickey D's.
Mickey D's, exactly.
Yeah, the proliferation of fast food and Doritos and all that type of thing.
Oh man, you're about to see what happened. You're about to see everything that's of it. Let's see what's happened since the 1950s. So let's start with the nutrients. Conventionally raised produce contain far less vitamins than they used to. You can credit this to pesticides, chemical fertilizer, and disrupting the soil quality and depleting the vital nutrients. So fertilizers are good to help you grow food fast and make it nice and big, but it also takes all the nutrients away from the actual earth. So grass, I don't know if anybody's ever heard this particular term. It's generally recognized as safe. Is a United States Food and Drug Administration designation that chemicals or substances added to food is considered safe by experts under conditions for its intended use. As an ingredient, the grass designation is exempted from the usual Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act, the FFDCA, the food additive tolerance requirements. Blah. The concept of the food additive being generally recognized as safe was described in the Food Additives Amendments in 1958. The FDA list of GRAS notices is updated approximately each month as of 2021. So before 2021, the list stayed pretty static, and now it's updated every month. You can get a GRAS designation two different ways. You can send a bunch of documents to be reviewed by an FDA member, and he will decide whether or not he will approve or disapprove your GRAS designation. Or the other one is that you can say, I self-affirm as GRAS. So me, as a food producer, say, this is GRAS. This is generally recognized as safe. And you take all of the responsibility on whether or not it is safe. So the only thing that's really protecting anybody is lawsuits. Either way, you're like the only way you can protect yourself is to sue the company when you realize that particular product is not safe. As of 2021, there are 955 ingredients that have been filed as GRAS under the FDA. Here's the list. At a quick glance, here are some of my favorites. So aluminum salts, used in deodorants, vaccine adjuvants, and also make sulfuric acid. Hydroxypropylmethyl cellulose, used to make bread rise. This was the chemical that was used in, and I think is still used, or I believe that they took it out, in Subway sandwiches and Subway bread. It also is used to make tile adhesive and detergents. Propylene glycol is also a sweetener, is used as a sweetener as far as food is concerned, but it's also used to make polymers, vape juice, and antifreeze. The FDA is also can also explicitly withdraw GRAS classification. So there is a possibility of having the FDA themselves say, okay, this was on the list, we're going to take it off, as it did for trans fat in 2015. So, hey guys, 1 out of 1,000. It seems we're getting closer to our goal of not having any of these chemicals on here anymore, right? In both cases, the only thing protecting us from any of this stuff is lawsuits, like I said before. So here are some of the industrial methods and waste used in common foods. We have collagen plastic for sausage casings. If you have any sausages that are straight, it's usually a plastic casing that's rounded, so stop eating hot dogs. Wood shavings in your cheese and salad dressing, and ice cream to thicken it. They use wood shavings to thicken ice cream. Without adding any calories, it makes it thicker. So it's not like flour. You're just eating wood. So, and they can say that it has more fiber. Like this cheese has more fiber now. So it looks healthy. Shellac, you know what shellac is? It's that stuff that you use to protect wood from weather. You know, it's kind of a paint that's used on pill coatings, candy, coffee beans to make things a hard shell, to have a hard shell around it. Polydimethylsiloxane. It's basically a very long name for silly putty. They put it in most fast foods and soft drinks, so it can be used it can also be used for caulks, you know, caulking windows and caulking like the glue stuff, and adhesives. Ammonia is used to clean most highly produced meat. It's also known as a toxic chemical used to clean stuff, to kill germs, tidying up around the house. But there is a toxic chemical to get rid of germs on your meat. Companies spray the meat with ammonia to kill bacteria before packaging. And it also results in what we know as pink slime. So when we're talking about the pink slime that goes into hot dogs and stuff like that, it can only be done that way because of ammonia. It's like you put it on the meat and there's this weird slime that comes off, and then they reuse that in other kinds of food. Silicon dioxide, aka sand, also known as sand. There is a silica, but the silicon dioxide is a synthetic sand. They make it in the lab. It's found mostly in powdered foods to prevent clumping because of moisture. So you can find a lot of these, the little bags of silica that you have. That's the kind of thing that says "do not ingest." Well, you'll find that stuff in powdered foods. Castoreum. This one was a weird one. This is a fancy schmancy word. They don't actually call it castoreum on the label. They call it natural flavoring. But surprisingly, it's actually beaver anal gland secretion used for flavor and perfumes. These glands are located near the beaver's butt and sometimes include the beaver's urine in guise of natural flavoring. So that's what we eat in some of the natural flavoring stuff that we take. And phthalates. Phthalates are a thin plastic layer that we put on all of our produce. So when you bite into an apple and it's nice and shiny and all that type of stuff, it's because they spray it with phthalates. So that's fun. Glyphosate. Just to let you know, glyphosate is a scourge on humanity at the moment and has been heavily used since the 80s. We consume more than 6 times the amount of glyphosate that Europeans do. So this is probably one of the reasons why we're growing bigger. We don't know. Causation studies haven't been done for that kind of stuff, so we don't know if it's true. We can link it. Also, industrial foods. When we're talking about industrial foods, we're talking about very, very large factories. Industrial foods allow for a certain percentage of defects. And this is because there's no way, the factories are so large, there's no way to keep it pristine and perfectly clean. So the FDA allows a certain amount of insect parts. Do I have this? Yes. No, sorry. Insect parts, rodent poop, mold, rodent hair, mostly because it's impossible to keep the vermin out of the large food processing plants. And for that reason, the different chemicals, they use different chemicals to counteract those defects, chemicals and medicine and that kind of stuff. And they use vaccines to help ensure that the animals don't have any viruses or anything like that. The recommended schedule for vaccines and various meats. So 11 plus vaccines for chicken. So when a chicken is born, all the way up to the first year, they get 11 vaccines, and then 1 vaccine every 3 months, a booster every 3 months. So they don't get all the vaccines, but these are the ones that are recommended for by the various veterinarians that are out there. Beef gets 21 vaccines. Pigs get 7 vaccines up to that first year of life, and then 1 every 6 months as a booster. And then fish get vaccinated. Yes, fish gets vaccinated. They get over 20 vaccines depending on the fish culture that exists. That was the present of our food system, and as we can see, the food system is broken and is not right. It's not good. We're eating sick food. It's toxic.
It's toxic.
Yeah.
Toxic.
This is the future of food. So UN Agenda 2030, the second goal of UN Agenda 2030 is ending world hunger by 2030. According to WEF food system analysis, growing food and feed, transporting food, cooking, eating, and throwing away food accounts for 1/3 of all greenhouse emissions. Food alone has the potential to use up the entire Paris Agreement's carbon budget. Dietary advice suggests 500 grams of meat per person. That's about 3 6-ounce burgers per week per person, which would be the equivalent to 26 kilograms per year. Tim Lang, a professor of food policy at the University of London, has eloquently put it, the rich need to eat less and differently so that the poor can eat more and differently. So there's kind of a competing ideas here. In one way, we want to end food hunger, but at the same time, we've got to watch out for global warming, so we have to reduce our certain foods that we're eating. So we have to reduce the amount of food that's on the planet, and at the same time, we need to increase the amount of food to end world hunger. The U.S. President Biden laid down a plan to end world hunger in the U.S. The U.S. being one of the richest countries in the world, this is a serious problem that shouldn't exist in the U.S. So it's kind of scary. The plan that he laid out has given $2.5 billion to startup companies focusing on finding solutions to hunger, $4 billion to philanthropy efforts to improve access to nutritious foods, promote healthy choices, and increase physical activity. So if you're somebody who wants a little bit of that cash, just make up some organization and see whether or not you're eligible to get a piece of that $4 billion. And he wants to give a whole $26 per person every month to help them eat correctly. He also wants to make free school meals for 9 million children or more by 2032. And again, it is very sad that the richest country in the world still needs to feed 9 million people because they're not getting enough food. 9 million children. Children shouldn't be starving in the States. It's unacceptable. We also have a thing to keep an eye on is the Codex Alimentarius. I forgot to spell this out. The FAO, which is the Food Agriculture Organization of the UN, in 1961, created a collection of internationally recognized standards and codes of practice, guidelines, and recommendations relating to food production, food labeling, and food safety. On the surface, this is fine. But as we know, the UN and these big organizations get convinced by very large companies to do certain things. As an example, here we go. In 1996, the German delegation, sponsored by 3 German pharmaceutical firms, we can guess which ones, put forward a proposal that no herb, no vitamin or mineral should be sold for preventative or therapeutic reasons, and that supplements should be reclassified as drugs. So these are the drug companies trying to get their competition out of the way. They're cheaper, much more eloquent competition out of the way. So these are honorable mentions. Unfortunately, if I were to go into these, each one of these would need a whole presentation on their own. They're working on edible insects. They're going to turn all of that stuff into flour, and we're going to eat very high protein floured cookies and cakes and various other things like that with edible insects. They're going to feed us a bunch of seaweed. So you're going to see a lot more seaweed on the market. There's plant-based meat. These plant-based meat companies have been making a lot of waves these last couple of years. If you've invested in plant-based meat companies in 2018, you'd have 4 times the amount of return that you have now. And then lab-grown meat, which just literally makes me puke. Like, just the concept of it just... I taste it, but it's terrible. So these are my solutions. Unfortunately, all of that was very, very exciting. Like, it wasn't very positive stuff. And there's so many things that we can discuss as far as solutions are concerned. And we're going to do that at the end of the movie, I think. But the essential thing is, first of all, follow these people. They have solutions that are very, 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 very doable. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing any of these stuff, or why any government wouldn't be doing any of the stuff that these guys are saying. And we can talk about it again after the film. And also, you need to understand that you need to take control of your food. Like, that's the only thing that you can do to be able to prevent all of the other stuff. So you got to start growing your food. You got to start knowing where your food comes from. And you got to start creating relationships with people that you can trust, as far as farmers and various other things like that. Just talk to them, ask them questions, that kind of stuff. Just a little personal story. In 2021, before my life went to shit, I took some advice from Media Monarchy's James Evan Pilato and ripped up my front yard. And this wasn't my first garden, but it was my largest garden to date. I had 14 tomato plants, 7 zucchini plants, 2 pumpkin plants, 1 watermelon, spaghetti squash, carrots, beets, broccoli, cabbage, potato, onions, rhubarb. A front lawn is completely useless, especially if it's just weeds. I planted a whole bunch of flowers. It was I was testing a lot of this stuff out, so a lot of weeds came back anyway. But it was a very fun experience, and I hope that everybody can do what James Evan Pilato said to do. And I hope I have inspired you to rip up at least a portion of your front lawn. You don't need to do this. This was insane. This was crazy. But just a little piece and make some potatoes. Potatoes are great. Potatoes are a lot of fun. This was a 2021 project. As of 2022, after the divorce, this neighbor here got pissed off, told the city that he didn't like the garden, and had my wife rip it up. My wife didn't fight. She could have kept it because who wants, like I was keeping this for the family, and she didn't do that. So I was about to start the movie, but I'm going to need to wait about 4 to 6 hours to get my water ration. So I'll be right back. If you like what you see and you want to know more about film production, please follow the website link in the description below to learn more. While you're there, you can check out my show notes, where you can double check my references, comment, and act like the film critic I know you are. Also, all of the items on the website are affiliate links, so if you find anything of interest, please click on through. Finally, please subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, pray, and send good vibes to help us keep delivering great content.